Hello. I'm just setting up. We're just getting started. We're going to be covering what's new in Tableau 2020.4. I can also hear myself somewhere, so I've got some feedback at the moment. But yeah, welcome to this live stream, everyone who's joining in. I assume we do have some people watching on the stream. This is going to be a long session.
I can't do that from here.
Siri seems to want to join in, so I'll be taking my watch off. It's going to be a long session. We're going to try and cover all the new features in 2020.4 in one go. Previously, we actually did them as separate live streams, but I think that sort of strung it out. And in this particular release, there's actually some features that have a lot of synergy. So I thought it would be great to just show everything working together seamlessly in one go. So we're going to be getting stuck into that in a moment. If you're just watching, if you're just joining, please leave a comment. I can see the comments myself, so please make sure you leave a comment in the chat section of the YouTube interface. It's normally on the right hand side depending on how big the video window is, but if not, you can just enable it and it will pop up depending on what app you're using. If you're on mobile, then you might have to scroll down. If you're on other devices, it might not show up. So if you can engage, that would be great. I will be paying attention to my Twitter as well. So if you've got no other way of reaching out, you can absolutely just send a chat there. Got a few people joining in. We've had a message from Mario, Shital as well, and Dimitri. Dimitri was actually in the last live stream. I remember Dimitri. So hello, Dimitri. How are you doing? We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. I'll give people a bit of time to join in because not everyone's always punctual. But in the meantime, we'll just sort of warm up, as it were. I'm just going to make sure everything's working technically. If you can hear me, please let me know in the comments. It's one of those weird things where you can't hear yourself easily sometimes when you're doing sound checks. So I think I sound okay, but if you can't hear me, let me know. Otherwise, just give me a thumbs up or yes, that's okay in the chat, and then I'll know we're good and we can get started. While that happens, I'm just going to change a few things on my end. If you see me looking to the left over here, it's actually because I've actually got the live stream set up here, so I keep looking over to my left hand side just to see what's going on, but essentially that's what I'm sort of trying to manage. Then I also have a chat window here, so if you see me looking to the left, it's not because I'm bored, it's just because I'm trying to manage several things at the same time. So hopefully that's all okay. I will also be getting messages from colleagues if I'm absolutely messing up. Thank you, Steph, for the message on Convo. So yes, I've got lots of places to be paying attention to, but for the next hour and a half, the key focus is 2020.4, so we're going to get stuck in. Before we get started, I always like to highlight that we do have a whole series of events. We have lots of great content on our YouTube channel as well. Let me start off with the YouTube channel actually, because of course I'm the YouTube fan here. So let's go to the YouTube channel here. We have lots of great content over the last year or so, ever since lockdown really sort of forced us all to become more digital and spend more time online. We've spent loads of effort and time adding really good quality content onto our YouTube channel. So absolutely go check it out. We're just shy of 10,000 subs. So I'd love to get to 10,000 subs before the end of January. That would really help us out, help spread the message out. We've had some absolutely fantastic content from the data scholars at the Information Lab. They've produced some amazing series in the channel. You might not even know about this, actually, if you haven't watched our channel before. There's a whole section on Tableau prep. In fact, if I just go to all videos, you can just see sort of the consistency. Pretty much every week, we are putting out a video showing you how to do really simple, but also really complicated things in Tableau. So there's a whole host of content here. I bet you if there's something you're stuck on, then it's going to be covered by one of these great individuals at the Data School. And it's going to be a video that is normally no longer than 5 to 10 minutes. The longer ones are obviously live streams or webinars, but it's a really easy way to get involved. The other place to check out is, of course, our meetup page. So this is the meetup page for this live stream. And essentially, this is where you can come to find all the events that we run up front. Short of engaging with us on social media and finding out there, you can actually see a whole calendar of events that we've got lined up. So we have some training sessions every week that you can take part in, but also we have some slightly off-the-cuff sessions based on what our data scholars are seeing in the field, what our consultants are seeing in the field, and of course live stream like today's where we're touching on new features. So whole range of content. You can always look up front ahead of time to see what's coming on, but also just pay attention to social media when we tweet these events out, and you can find out that way. So that's pretty much the ways to get in touch. It's always good to cover that at the beginning so that we can focus the entire session on 2020.4. All right, to get into 2020.4, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go onto this page here. So Tableau this year have actually released a very nice video. I'm not going to play a video on stream. That's not what we're here to do. It's a 6-minute video and it covers all the features. So this is a great page. I think this is the first time they've done this. I'd like to think they've done this because the YouTube content has been going through the roof, so that they're sort of putting their own best foot forward and creating summarized content for us to get involved with. It's a video that you can download, put it in your own COE, and it covers all the features in 6 minutes. I actually used to do this myself in 10 minutes. They've done it in less. So that's great to see this time around. And then the main page that covers all the features is, of course, this one here. So I'll go back to the top. This is sort of the highlight page for every release. It's probably the best page to send to people as a link. It's the easiest way to sort of make sure that people can see all the features in one place. And it's nicely put together. They sort of cover the headline features at the top. They give some quotes and they sort of really do their best job to show off these features, and typically using GIFs, videos if necessary, but they have this great filter at the bottom, and this filter always surprises me because every year it gets longer. Every time you hit this drop down, it gets a little bit longer, and the list of products just gets longer and longer and longer. I know there's a couple of products missing in here. For example, we don't have Tableau CRM, which is a new addition to the Tableau family because of the Salesforce acquisition, but it's all going to be here essentially as the Tableau architecture and the platform gets more and more encompassing and we get more and more capabilities. But this is the roster of features that we have for 2020.4. We have a whole load of features, and before I get stuck in, this was actually the first release where I was actually really confused sort of what to tell people, because I spent most of my time in the browser. I basically managed to use 90 to 95% of these features entirely in the browser, as well as doing things that I couldn't do in the browser before entirely in the browser. So I'm going to try and mix that up a bit today. You'll notice that I talked about authoring and not desktop, because I think that's actually going to be the way to talk about building workbooks and dashboards in the future. You'll be an author. Where you do it won't really matter, whether it's on desktop or in the browser. It's all going to be the same experience. The other thing to bear in mind is that obviously some of these are slightly difficult to show on the stream. So things like the data connectors, I'm not really going to cover because all data connections are more or less the same. They all have their own quirks, and there's hundreds of data connectors out there for Tableau. But I will touch on some of the nuances around these connectors. So I'm not going to skip past them. I'm going to highlight why they're good if there's a little bit of context as to how they're built or there's something new about them. Okay. So in order to do this, I'm going to try and balance my time between Tableau Online and Tableau Desktop. So to start off with, I'm actually going to go over to Tableau Prep, and we're going to start in the browser. So let's go over to Tableau Online. Now this is my own Tableau Online instance. It's actually a beta instance. It's used for testing purposes, but you can see here that it's actually currently on Tableau 2020.4. So this is the most recent release. If you ever wondered what this 10AX is, that's essentially the cluster, the AWS cluster that your Tableau Online instance is on. Depending on where you sign up to Tableau Online, you'll be in different locations. So if I switch to one of my other ones, for example, if I switch to the Information Lab demo instance, you'll see that this has DUB1 in front of it. It's actually going to ask me to log in. I should already be logged in. There we go. And if I go over here to the About Online, you'll see that this says DUB01. So this is a really, really good place to, try the best of Tableau, in my opinion, because they are really putting a lot of effort into making sure that the online experience is really good. And so that's what we're going to be using mostly today. In the event there is a bug, there have been some bugs in the browser. So if in the event there's a bug, I will switch over to desktop and we'll show as many features there. If there's something different in desktop, I will also show that. But pretty much everything's like for like, if that makes sense. So let's get stuck in. I'm actually going to switch back to my test instance because I actually know that everything worked there really, really well. We'll come back to the Information Lab demo instance actually, because I've got something little special to show you. This is actually something that's out in the public. Tableau are asking people to try it out and give them feedback. So I'm going to kind of leave it as a mystery of what that is. But if you stay till the end of the stream, I'll be showing you something that's only just went into preview yesterday. So it wasn't part of the beta. It went into preview yesterday, and I'm going to be pretty excited to show you how that works. Okay, so let's get stuck in. I'm going to go over to Explore here, and this essentially just shows me all the content on my Tableau Online instance. Now, if I hit this drop down arrow at the top, I'm able to see all the different types of content on my Tableau Online instance. If I'm on Tableau server, it's more or less exactly the same. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to open up a data source. And you can see here that I have a Superstore data source, and I also have a data source called Prep in the browser. I actually created this a while back when I was trying to create demos for this product. But we're not going to touch any of those. What I wanted to show you is that I have a Superstore data source already here, but I'm actually going to connect to a fresh Excel file. I'm going to upload that here onto Tableau Online. So I'm going to hit new, and the first thing I'm going to do is hit flow. So what will happen is it will open up a new browser, and essentially we get straight into it. So if you've ever used Tableau Prep, you'll notice that actually on desktop, it can be a bit of a performance, hungry application. But on the browser, at least here in Tableau Online, where Tableau are looking after the resources somewhere in the cloud, it's very, very smooth. So let's just go ahead and connect to a data source. I've got some files on my desktop. I'm not going to connect to a database. That's sort of asking for trouble on a live demo. But I'll go ahead and connect to an Excel file. I'll actually go ahead and connect to a file on my desktop. So I have some Superstore sales Excel file. You've seen this before. It's nothing new. It's nothing different to the one that's in the Tableau repository. It's a 3 meg file. It will upload very, very quickly. And what's great about this is that when Tableau actually uploads the file, it's actually keeping the Excel file in its original format. It's not changing it to an extract. So you're actually working with the original asset. You can see that here on the left-hand side because I get all the things I'm used to in the prep for desktop. So I can see the orders, people's returns, and everything works as it normally does. If you're wondering why I'm seeing order twice, that's because these little icons refer to a specific feature in Excel. The orders is essentially just the sheet as we see it in Excel, but this one at the top here, it's actually a named range in Excel. So named ranges come through as their own table. So if you ever wanted a hack as to how to clean up an Excel file very quickly, just create a named range on the section of the data that you need, and that will come in on its own in Tableau. So let's go ahead and drag just the sheet that we want in Tableau. And as you can see, it's really smooth. I can just drag it in, add view and clean step here, and it will just works as expected pretty much. Some context behind this: Tableau Prep was actually built as a browser first application, and then it was packaged for desktop. So most of what we've been using is actually just a desktop application, and it's been very, very easy to just bear me 1 second. I think I'm getting a message from someone. It's been very, very easy to use. If I just let me just set this up so I can actually see this a little bit easier. 1 second. I feel like this is an important message, so I'm just going to make sure that I can see this. Cool. So we've just got a standard prep instance here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this as you normally do in Tableau Prep on the desktop. I'm going to do an automatic split just so you can see that working really, really quickly. In Prep, what it would do is actually create 3 new columns. So we've got our original order ID column here, and then we've got the 3 new columns available on the left-hand side. Now, the other thing you can do is you can, of course, bring in other sets of data. So, of course, I can connect to other things, join them, clean them, and bring the data together. Everything as you'd expect. Now, there's a few quirks with working in the browser, and it's probably worth highlighting this before I build out a flow very, very quickly. Okay. The first thing is if I just go ahead and close the tab, I didn't save anything. Okay. I didn't hit save anywhere. And you're probably wondering, well, where did it go? Well, all your work is automatically saved in the background. Let me just show you where that is. If I go to my home, I go to explore, and I go to default, you'll see that I have this area here, and you can see that I've got 2. I've got one which I worked on the 8th of December of last year. So this draft here was saved on the 8th of December. So this gives you a context of how long it's keeping these drafts for. It never gets rid of them, essentially. Whereas this new flow here, I never named it, I never published it, I never did anything to it, created just a few minutes ago, 6th of Jan, 6:13. So everything that you do as you're doing it is being automatically saved. So if your computer crashes or something goes wrong, you can absolutely just very quickly come back here to the default page and hop in, and everything is good to go. We carry on exactly where we left. If I click on the clean step, it's almost like we didn't miss a beat. What you then do have to do before you run any flow is, of course, publish it. And this is different, isn't it? Because on desktop, we're used to saving things, but here on Prep in the browser, we actually have to publish things. So let's go ahead and publish this. It will ask you where to publish. It's a bit of a weird terminology. I would prefer that to say save, because if I'm working in the browser, publish seems like the wrong word, if that makes sense, because publish used to be from when you're going from desktop to server. So in essence, if I'm in the browser, it should just be called save. But I'll save it to my default folder. I'll call it 2020.4 demo. And we'll, I think I put a dot there. You're not supposed to. Actually, no, I'm supposed to choose somewhere to save it as well. 2020.4 demo, hit publish. I've put it into my default space. And now that's basically saved or published in this particular instance. I get a success message at the top. And now if I add a very simple output here, you can see that this is pretty much ready to go. I get the standard output options. Okay. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is that, of course, Tableau Prep needs to be able to run the flow, okay? And in order to run a flow on Tableau Online or Tableau Server, there's a little catch here. You're actually going to need something called the Data Management Add-on, which is an additional add-on in terms of licensing for Tableau Prep and Tableau Prep Conductor. And so it's a little bit of a convoluted tree of sort of relationships, but you've got Tableau Server and Tableau Online. They're the core product. And then there's something called the Data Management Add-on, which essentially is two things. It's part of the it's two things. It's the data catalog, which is essentially linked to the Tableau lineage features that you get when you look at Tableau Online assets, essentially on Tableau Server assets. Then you've got Tableau Prep Conductor, which allows Tableau Prep to be automated on Tableau Online and Tableau Server. So those things are sort of all bundled into one product, which is called the Data Management Add-on. So you do need that, because in order to run the flow, you actually have to have that enabled. So when I hit run here, I'll show you a little quirk with this in a second. In order to do that, in order to have that running on the server, you do need that data management add-on. Otherwise, you can absolutely, publish a flow, but you won't be able to sort of automate anything. You just sort of be sort of using Tableau as like a nice place to save the files, if that makes sense. So the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up. Notice that on the output page, we don't have any ability to export to a CSV. They've removed that option, whereas on desktop, you'd have that option. So bear that in mind if you're going to be working in the browser. You have to publish as a data source or to a database. To be honest, the database is the most important thing there, and most people shouldn't really be writing, flat files to their desktop. Really, it doesn't sort of make sense. But if you have to, you have to, and that's fine. I'm going to do a publish data source to keep this simple. I'm going to send it to my default folder as well. I'm going to call this 2020 for demo output. Great, and I'll just call this done live on stream. Okay, and we're going to create a table because it's a brand new item, and we're just going to hit run. Now, the thing is, when you run, it's not like desktop. You have to publish your changes, because I've changed something here. It's asking me if I want to publish the changes. So I wish it would do that automatically, because now that I've done that, you can see it's successful. I then have to hit run again. And now the flow is actually added to the queue. It's not going to run in front of me. What I'm seeing right now is the preview. When you hit run on Tableau Prep in the browser, it gets added to a queue. Let me show you where that queue is. If I go back to default here, this is the Tableau Online view, and I go back down to this option here on the bottom left called jobs. When I click on that, I actually have this job pending here, and you can see that it's joined a queue. Essentially, I'm actually in the global queue for all Tableau Online users in my specific Tableau Online instance, which is 10AX. I always forget where AX is, but I think it's Arizona, or one of those AWS locations. But essentially, it's a pending item. So the run of that flow, the full run of that flow, goes into a queue. However, my preview happens immediately. So the reason this is important is because if your preview is, let's say, limited to the first 1,000,000 rows and you've only got 10,000 rows, then you're fine because you're seeing your output right here. But if your data set is really large, let's say you're connected to a database and you're only sampling your data, which Tableau Prep likes to do, then you're not going to get your output straight away like you would on desktop, where you can see a progress bar and run the output straight away. If I go back here and I just hit refresh, I think this should actually be done now. It gives you two times. So it gives you a runtime. It's still pending actually, so it's not run. I assume this is busy because the US is online at the moment, and that seems to be the sort of the more busy Tableau Online instance, as it were. But it's been queuing for 1.3 minutes, if that makes sense. So we're going to wait for this to finish. If I go back over here, I'm going to actually make a few more changes, and we can come back and look at that sort of job and see how long it took. So I'll close these two. And I'm going to go ahead and do a few more things. I'm going to add some more items from the Superstore Excel. So we've got people file here. I'm going to work pretty quickly here now because I'm running a bit behind. So I'm going to work pretty quickly here to add this in. And this person file is actually just going to give us the names of the managers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join it on. I'm going to remove my output there, and I'm going to try and make sure I do a left join by clicking the left hand part of this circle and the inner part of the circle as well. So that brings through all 9,994 records, which is good. Although I do seem to think I had more. So I had 10,000 rows here. No, 9,994. It's rounding that up. So that's correct. We've got the right number of rows coming through. And then I've got returns. Now, my returns data has, this is a little bit of a weird one because some of these have multiple rows for the same amount of data. So if I just actually, this is a weird change they made to this data set, which makes it really hard to demo with, which is if I was just to let's go over here and let's drag this right up. So if I was just to click on this one, you see there's actually 4 rows for this order, right? So there's duplication unnecessarily being introduced here because there's no other information to tell me what the items being returned are. So all I know is that I've got 4 rows that say the same thing. So I think this is a purposely created sort of sample data, because what we're missing is the information to tell us what's going on. Either that, or we're missing another table that's supposed to tell us what's actually being returned, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to join that on because it's just going to cause havoc for no reason, and it's not really adding value. So I'm just going to sort of bin that whole section of the flow. One of the great new things you can do is group things. So if I right click and select those 4 things, this was actually in the previous version, you can actually group things into a nice little folder, and you can of course name that group. So I'm going to call this connection and join. And now we're pretty much ready to go. I can, of course, add a clean step and bring that outside of the flow. What I actually need to do is make sure that I bring it, I have to actually create a step outside of here. So I've sort of Sherlocked myself here a little bit, because every time I add something, it's always going to be inside of that step. And it's not, I can't add anything outside. So I've actually just created a container across the whole thing. But if you hadn't done that, if you just selected the sections that were necessary basically up until here, then you would have been okay. So I'll still build this as it was, but that's just a caveat to be aware of with that group option. So the last thing I'll do is we'll just quickly add an output here, and I'll just go back and check if this has finished. Let's just make sure this is finished. Yes, it's finished. It queued for 1.5 minutes, and it ran in 0.1 of a minute, which I'd assume is like 10%. So ran in 6 seconds, if that makes sense. So that's pretty good. If I go back to home and I go to explore and then default, we can actually look at my 2024 demo draft here. If I click on that, we get this interface which shows me the last previous state of this particular demo. So if I go back and I hit publish, it's actually going to save these changes. I'm going to get a nice green indicator, and then if I go back and I actually hit refresh this page, you'll see that the draft status disappears from the top, and I get a nice clean flow that's updated to look exactly like how it was. I have some information here at the top about the run history. So I've run this once, it succeeded, it generated 9,994 rows. Earlier on, I mentioned the lineage capability. So here, I'm also able to see each of those columns that I've actually got in my data set. On the right-hand side, I've got a little bit more information about what it's connecting to, essentially an Excel file, the tables in that Excel file that it's connecting to, the actual flow itself, some information about what's going on. The individual fields don't have much information at the moment, but I'm sure Tableau will add to this in the future. That flow is creating an output here as a data source, which is called 2020.4 demo output, and it's owned by myself. And here, if I was actually to click on this, I'd see everything else that I own on Tableau server. So that's what the lineage feature does, and prep is fully integrated into that. So you can really start to see that if you have a full-on workflow in the browser, then this is going to actually be really, really good for you. The other thing is it highlights the connection. So it's obviously got my Tableau server connection because I output to that. You can see that it says that there, and my input is actually in Excel over here on the left hand side. Okay, so that's pretty much prepping the browser in a nutshell. I'm going to look over to my questions to see if there's everything else that anyone has brought up. Everyone can hear me, that's great. Sessions are super useful. Thank you, Dimitri. If you've got any other questions about prepping the browser, now's a good time, because the next feature I'm going to go to is spatial features in prep, which I'm also going to show you in the browser before we move over to web authoring. Okay, so I'm just looking at Omar, not completely integrated if you use a data source with a contact. Omar, I'm not sure what you mean by a data source with a contact. What do you mean a data source with a contact? If you can provide a little bit more context while I go to the next feature, then I'll come back to your question in a second. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my view here. I'm actually going to try and see if I can ungroup everything exactly. And what I was supposed to do before is just select these, right click, and then group, and then it does that, which is a much better way of sort of grouping things. Okay. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is show you that you can actually add spatial files to Tableau Prep. Before, you couldn't really bring in spatial files and join them to your data. And so now you can do that. To do that, you just hit the plus icon and there's a new spatial file option here. It's no different to what you'd expect pretty much from, you know, the spatial features. We've had this in desktop for some time. What I've got here is actually I've got two files. I've got region and state files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the zip file. The caveat here is to bear in mind that when you typically work with spatial files, you typically unzip them and then you connect to the shape file itself. With Tableau Prep, it doesn't want that. It wants the whole zip package. And if you think about it, it makes sense because you're uploading it to the online interface, right? So you just want the zip file itself. I'm going to bring in the state file here and I'm going to choose for upload. Okay, that's going to upload in 3.2 megabytes time. So we'll give that a few seconds to just complete sort of the natural course of action. And when that's ready, we should be able to see that here on the left hand side. So yep, you can see that it's even brought that in for us. And it's a nice touch because it's seen that there's only one table in there. And if I've connected to it, then it might as well bring in the file. So that's a sort of small quality of life improvement there. And you can notice that in this preview here at the very bottom, you've got the geometry. So this geometry field is what we're interested in because I want to join that onto my Superstore data file. Okay, so I'll go ahead and hit the plus on the clean step. And what I want to do is I just want to see which field I can use to join with Superstore, because if I look at the clean step up here in clean 3, I really should be naming these clean steps, but because it's a live stream, I'm sort of pressed for time, so I'm working slightly faster than I typically would. I've got a column here that says state, so ideally I want something like the state name in my spatial file, and I think I do have that here. So I do have that. I have 56 state names there, and over here, if I go back into this, I always like to do the check of the data before. I have 49. So there's obviously there's a few states that are not in the Tableau data sets that are in the official geospatial files for the United States. So we'll be interested to know what those are. We'll find out in a second. So what I can just do is I can hopping around the screen here, I can just go in here and select join. Now I've chosen to do it there because that's the first available clean step that makes the most sense. And what I need to do is make sure my join condition is correct here, because you can see it's not matched it correctly. It's sort of looked for two things that sound the same, but that's not actually what I need. So again, I just need to join name to state in Superstore. So if I go over here on the left, just choose name, then state and name should all line up. And then what I'll do is I'll actually get sort of a numbering here. So I can see here that, yeah, we got most of our data sort of matching nicely. Bear in mind that I'm only matching the things in the middle, so things that are in both files, so states that are in both files. But I end up with 7. If I just click on those 7, you can actually see that there's a few states that are in my spatial file that are not in the Tableau file. So by clicking on this 7, I'm actually able to see that data here. And so this is useful context because it lets me know maybe if I'm missing cells from somewhere that we should really have cells. But it's also just a nice way to get sort of to that, deep data very, very quickly. What I will do is I'll do a left join because I need all my data regardless of if there's a state or not. Essentially, I don't want to miss out anything that doesn't have state. You'll see my number doesn't change. 9,994 is still the main number, and so we are pretty much good to go. What I'll do is I'll move this over here and I will remove that connection, and then I'll just add this to that output, so I don't have to go and sort of restructure my outputs too much, although I actually hadn't written anything to this one. So let's just go default and just go 2024 spatial output, and I'll hit run flow. Publish changes, of course, that always gets me. I think this should be like, publish changes and run flow as an option, if that makes sense. So if anyone from Tableau is watching, that's hopefully some feedback you can incorporate in the future. And of course, it goes back to our queue. I'm not going to wait for this to run this time. If I just refresh this a little again, Did I actually hit run? It doesn't look like I hit run at all. I think it published the changes, but did I run the flow? There we go. That's been added to the queue now. And now if I refresh this, we should be good. Everything's there. So that's pretty much it. Those are 2 new features in Tableau Prep. That took 20 minutes, a little bit longer than I'd like to, but I just really wanted to show that the whole Tableau Prep pipeline does now happily work in the browser. The other thing to bear in mind is that, I think there's a lot of people who haven't used WebEdit in a while, and so they actually aren't familiar with the amount of connectors that are available through the web now. So if I just go to this sort of plus icon, all of these connectors you see here, especially these database connections, work in the browser. So you don't need to do anything like install drivers or get anything weird going on. As long as you have your connection details, you can essentially connect to these as well, which is a great real start. And of course, your static files are still available. The only downside here is that those static files, maybe you had them synced to a SharePoint folder, and those SharePoint folders were updated maybe by a script somewhere. You lose that sort of connection. That's where Tableau Bridge really should be able to sort of step in and bridge this feature, but at the moment it's not really sort of also improved in its capability, and it's not really a viable option. We don't see businesses using it a lot, which is a shame. It is a really powerful capability, but it's just not getting the traction that it deserves for getting static files up to Tableau Online. So that's something to be aware of. Databases are obviously much more preferred. Let me look back at the comments and see if Omar's maybe got back to us. Have you tried to create a table with a geometry data type? How did you set up the srid of the column? Okay, so sorry Omar, I don't really understand this question. If I go back a little bit, in the lineage, you can set up the contact person for an external asset, but if you use said external asset in the flow, it wouldn't identify the contact person. That is true. That is true. So Omar, if I just step back through Omar's sort of points here, if I just go back to default and I go to 2020.4 demo, and then we go to lineage. It's a little bit of a Easter egg hunt. And I go back to owners. The only time you can really know that something's going on is in this page, for example. What you can do though, is you can actually set up data quality warnings, and data quality warnings do appear for everyone using that data source pretty much across the product. So whilst the prep flow is not going to tell you who created the data asset, if I was to just say, for example, let's go to explore, go to default. We created a data source, spatial output, this one. I will click on it and I will click on these 3 dots and I'll add a quality warning. Okay. And I will enable the warning to say that this has been deprecated. I'll make it high vis and I'll say live on stream just so you can see this populated, and I'll hit save. That will save the data quality warning to this data set. Now, the key thing, and I'm not actually sure what will happen here, is if I then go to a flow. Now, weirdly, because I'm on this page, I obviously saw that there's a data quality warning there already, okay? But I don't see any data quality warning here yet, so you don't see it on the dashboard, and I don't see it anywhere here as well. So on the left-hand side, it would be nice to have something there. On desktop, you do actually see a little indicator to say there's an issue with this data source. So hopefully that makes its way to Tableau Prep very, very soon. Show any mismatch values, yeah. SRID, the geospatial projection, but for prep instead of data quality warning, because it's better to use the data roles to cleanse the data, right? Yeah, it is a little bit it really depends how you sort of do your workflow. So if I was to this is probably the last question I'll answer on prep before I move on. If I just sort of go here and I go to clean 3, one of the things you can do in prep is assign data roles to specific columns. So think of that as metadata. So for example, if I just click on this one here, bear with me one second. Where are we? Here we go. So if I click on the icon, sorry, I thought it was in these 3 dots, but I forget it's actually in the icon where you change data types. You have this option to assign data roles here. Okay, so you can assign specific things that Tableau can be aware that, look, this is a spatial field in terms of geography, email, URLs, but this, I don't think this is what you're quite talking about. I think normally in organizations, metadata is handled at a much more granular level, and you can probably have a lot richer sort of information in databases that support metadata sort of alignment and so on and so forth. So it's not going to be perfect. Tableau Prep is only 3 years old now. So it's still a new feature, relatively speaking, new tool. So hopefully they add features. They are adding them very, very quickly, and it's something to just look out for. And as ask, the ideas page for Tableau is very, very well viewed, and Tableau developers do spend their time on there trying to digest what we're asking for. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I've created a whole flow here in prep in the browser. I don't want the stream to become just about Tableau prep, so I do want to move on to authoring, because that is the next big hitter in terms of features. So if you've got any other questions, please ask them, and then I'll come back to them at the end once we've covered everything, just to make sure we get through the session today. Okay, so I'll go back into the 2020.4 page here. I'll actually close this one because I don't want this page, and we'll just go back here and we'll go. I'm just going to work my way through the list. It's actually the easiest way because it's sort of in order of importance, as it were. So the next one is multiple mark layer support. So this is essentially the capability in Tableau to do multiple layers inside of maps, essentially. So I can probably hear some of you saying, oh, well, I could already do dual axis. Well, this lets you go beyond two layers. Okay, so let's go back. I'm going to close this prep flow. I'm not going to even save it because that's all fine. Let me close a few things. I'll go back to home, and what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to connect to the spatial file I just created in Tableau Prep, just to keep this whole theme in the browser. This is the spatial output that I created. If I just click on that, I can check that the spatial files actually came through correctly. I have a geometry field here, which would have come from the US sort of file that I downloaded from the US geospatial body. I forget their name, but the geometry field is there, and that's what I need. So I'll go ahead and create a new workbook. This time, instead of a prep flow, I'm creating a new workbook, and you see that it connects to it. It looks pretty much like an extract published to Tableau server, because of course it is. Now, the thing you'll miss here is that obviously I've got some data types already predefined here, so things like city, strings, obviously measures, those are all predefined, but everything else is pretty much vanilla. I don't have any of the hierarchy metadata that I had in Tableau desktop for this kind of same file. So if you want to create that, you'll have to do that. But in order to show you this feature, I'm just going to start very, very simple. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and find the location information. So there's postal code, but there's state here. So if I just double click on state, this time I'm using the geocoded state. So if you look at this, there's two state files. There's a state file, which is essentially the geospatial geometry. So you can see that that's here. It's called a geometry. And this one is actually an inferred spatial field because it understands the list of states, and it's basically mapping that to the inbuilt Tableau geospatial data base inside of the product, which is actually running on a hyper data source already in the product, if that makes sense. So if I just expand that, you can see here are all the states, and they're nicely highlighted. What I'll do is I'll make this a filled map just to make it nice and easy to see. And I typically add a little bit of, I call it pop, but essentially I just add a border, a white border. I meant to turn the background opacity down, not the actual map. So let's bring this back up to 100%. Let's go to map at the very top, and let's go to layers, and then let's wash out the map almost 80%. There we go. So we can see a bit of the map, but I just want to focus on the states here so you can see the feature working nicely. The last thing I'll do is I'll bring state onto label here. Okay, and so we can just see the individual states. So that's pretty good. Now, what you could have done before, and what was always possible, is I could have just, I'm holding command on my Mac, it's control on a Windows machine. I could have just copied the latitude and longitude and essentially created this weird matrix, and then done a dual axis on each of these, and that would have created the sort of two-layer effect that I actually want to see. But if you want more than two layers, you'd kind of get stuck. So here you can see now that I've superimposed both of them, but they both have the map capability here. What I need to do is change this one, the top one, to a circle. And what we should see, there is actually a circle there, but it's the color is a little bit off. So let me make this yellow just so we can see it more clearly. I have a funny feeling it's actually behind. Yeah, that's correct. It's actually behind. So what I've done is I've put this the wrong way around. Classic. So I'm just going to try this, and fingers crossed. Yeah, there we go. So all I did is I switched the pills around, and now you can see that I have two layers on my map, but I can't do any more than that. It's sort of limited. So I'll create a new sheet and I'll show you the new feature. I'm gonna hit the state again, double hit state. So we're going to get a nice filled map. This time I'm just using the Tableau geospatial item here. Let's go to border. Let's set it to white. And I'm not going to bother with the state names. You can still see a bit of that in the background. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this geometry field. Now this has my polygons that I joined inside a Tableau prep to this data source. And if I start dragging it, you'll see that you get this new option here which says add a marks layer. And this is where you need to drop this in order to enable the layer. If you drop it anywhere else, it will just get interpreted as a normal instruction in terms of a Tableau view. But if you specifically drop into this gray target area, you can see that it's highlighting here, then it will actually become a map layer. And this is different because unlike before where I could only add 2 layers, I can add as many of these as I want. So let me format these so it's actually clear and easy to see. Let me grab this one here and I'll just turn it into a circle. And what actually happens here is that these ones observe the order. Okay, so if I change this to orange like I did before, you should see, has that changed? Yeah, is it changing or has it changed? No, it's changed. So oh, interesting. I only have 1 dot. I wonder why that is. Why do I only have 1 dot? Why do I only have 1 dot? I think that's the aggregate position of all the different. That's the aggregate position of all the different states. Let me just double check something. Let me just clear this. I'm panicking here because I think something's gone wrong here. Let me just double click geometry just to make sure this geometry information works correctly. And then I'm going to drag state onto layers. Okay, that works fine, and all the dots are there. And then if I go ahead and add this to orange, that works fine. So that's bizarre. Maybe I missed a step when I was creating something, but essentially if you drag all the items on, then it just generally works. So here I've not done something exciting because I've dragged 2 of the same thing. I'm basically superimposing state dots onto state polygons. So let's get rid of one of these. If I just click on this drop down, you'll see that you get a list of options, and one of the options is to remove it. But I can also move it down, disable the selection. I'll come to this in a second. I'm going to go ahead and remove this initially. Okay, so we just go back to the normal thing. I'm actually going to do something different. I'm going to superimpose the city onto the state. Okay, so let's go ahead and drag city onto mark layers, and what you'll see is now these are meaningfully different bits of information superimposed on each other. So if I go to color and I just set this to orange so you can get a really good contrast, you can now see this working a lot better. And what I can do with this particular layer is I can say size this by the sales. If I just drag that there, and if I just wait a second, that will update. This is a little bit small, so let me just bump this up. What will happen after this is that what I want to do is actually add not too much more information, but a bit more information. Okay, so instead what I'm going to also do is if I go back to the geometry, I'm going to add region onto the color so that I can see the different regions in the background, if that makes sense. So let's just put that onto color and we should be good. So there we go. I've sort of created something mildly disgusting, and there's a bit of an overlap in terms of colors. You can see it's a bit of a trip as well. As I hover over everything, it just keeps flashing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable this background layer for selection, right? So what I can't do now is select it. When you've got your mouse on it, you have to move it off the view and then move it back on for it to work. Okay, so if I just move back to just reset this again, and if I just go this way, come on, let's get this going. There we go. If I just move out back this way, you'll see that now as I hover over these ones, only when I hover over the circles does the tooltip and everything activate. Everything else is just the context. So you get some additional functionality that you didn't really have before in terms of disabling the layers. And you can of course keep going with even more granular information. I think postal code here, if I just very quickly look at this, if I just open a new sheet, I'm not sure what this actually is in the American data set. Is it? Yeah, okay, it's pretty good. I think we're going to use that. Let's just see how granular that is on a map. It seems to be wanting to visualize it. So let's have a go. Let's just bring that in and drop it into postal code. Okay, yeah, that gets a lot busier. It's a lot more busier than the states. But it doesn't really make sense in this particular case, because now I've got 3 things and it's a little bit confusing. So let me just change the shape so you can see that they are actually very different. I'll change it to square, and I'll change the size right down so you can see that, and then I'll zoom into a particular section so you can sort of see the difference between the cities and the different postal codes that sort of go with that. So you're starting to add lots of information on. This isn't a great example. I wanted to keep it simple for the demo, just with something that you're familiar with, so you can try this yourself. But I'm very limited in terms of what Superstore actually offers you in terms of visualizing things. But where this is useful is if, let's say, you got some spatial information that told you about building locations, then you got some additional spatial information that told you about, you know, the location of roads or rivers. Then you got another spatial layer that told you the information about, you know, a particular area, for example, like some context, maybe flood zones, or maybe, you know, fire or safety numbers in the particular area. You could visualize this context in the background, and then on top of that, visualize the key piece of information that you want. So this is a great feature because it makes layers in maps data driven, which is really, really powerful. It allows you to sort of build that in the same way you know how. The other thing is that, of course, you can hack this, and a lot of people on Tableau Public have actually used this to build multiple alternatives of charts, because essentially what you can do is you can just make any measure a latitude and longitude, and then use that axis to essentially visualize whatever you want. So you're essentially hacking the measure, as it were, to behave like a latitude and longitude, because after all, that's all maps are. And then you're able to very basically sort of, you know, create multiple layers and visualizations to do things you couldn't do before. I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff. To me, it's a hack. I know for a fact that Tableau will be adding layer supports to other mark types. They've said it publicly and at conference as well. So this is just the first iteration of layers, and it's coming to maps first, because, you know, that makes a lot of sense. But, you know, in the future, of course, when they add this to other capabilities, I'd expect them to show some unique aspects to those mark types that you'd want. So, for example, we're dealing with maps here, so it makes a lot of sense to be able to disable a selection. But you can envisage a world where maybe you're dealing with another mark type and you want to maybe disable something else, like you want to change the way things layer, or you want to change the way things sort of augment on each other, or maybe you want things to sort of affect each other. So if you layer crime rates with, I don't know, something like police reports, you can have the two data layers interact in a way that's really, really powerful, either driven by parameters, actions, or some of the new capabilities. So that's a flavor of what's sort of possible with this. It's quite a nice feature. Most people, I think, are using it not for maps at the moment, but it does really enable some really nice options in terms of how you use maps. And I think it makes maps a lot more fun. We're going to see a lot more sort of creativity in Tableau Public, and also in businesses, and how they use this and how they implement it going forward. Okay, let me check over the comments. Omar, you're really heavy on the comments today. It's great to have lots of engagement. Postal code gives you more than 3,000 marks. It should do. Actually, it's interesting. I'm on the postal code layer here. It says 812 marks. I'm not actually sure what that number refers to, though. The easiest way to check is just to go to a new sheet, and if you drag anything onto detail, okay, and it will visualize it for you. At the very bottom, it says 630 marks. So in this particular data set, I don't have 3,000 marks. It's just 630. The way to break that down would be to add order ID and product name. Actually, product name and order ID, because each order can have multiple products. So when I add those things to the level of detail, you'll see that this number of marks explodes to 9,975. Okay, so that's how to find out sort of what the level of detail is in your data set. You know, make sure you understand your data set very, very well. Dimitri, hi, DMA has a cost of several $100s plus additional data management add-on. Okay, cool, per license. This is to do with the data management add-on. There is actually a per person price that's applied to the whole entire Tableau server. So if you have 100 people on Tableau server or Tableau online, and you want the data management add-on, they multiply the price, which is, I think, 5 or I don't actually remember. You can go to Tableau pricing. Let's go to this Tableau pricing. And it says it here in very, very clear terms for teams and organizations. If I go to this page, so it's $5.50 per person. per month billed annually. So it depends on the scale of implementation of your Tableau Online setup. So this is all here. I think it's really easily laid out. You can sort of get caught out by the per user per month pricing, but I think it's laid out in a way that allows you to compare it more easily with other products, because that's typically how it's, you know, it's sold in other products, as it were. But Tableau have traditionally always done yearly pricing, but a lot of competitors do monthly pricing, so that's why I think they changed to this format. You can also see the Tableau Online option. Tableau Online essentially just costs more because your Tableau's hosting it for you, so that the price difference is essentially Tableau Creator doesn't change, but if you look at this, $42 for Explorer, $35, the difference in cost is basically the cost per person to host an AWS setup and make sure everything's maintained and working properly. Okay, let me go back to dollars. Yeah, exactly. So Omar, you got the price right there. That's all covered very nicely. For reference, there is a bit of a lag on stream, so I'm reading your comments and you're seeing my response to them like with a 1 minute delay, up to 1 minute delay. So just bear that in mind if I'm sort of a bit delayed in terms of responding to what you see, because I might move on then see your comment in retrospect. Okay, so let's go back to the new features list. The Redshift spatial support. This is a sort of a nice one. It's basically just a very basic function where in Amazon Redshift, which is a data store type, you can now add spatial information and Tableau can interpret it. Traditionally, Tableau has always been able to connect to Redshift, but what it didn't pull in are the spatial fields that were actually held in that. So there's nothing really to show here. I could have set up an AWS instance just to show this, but I think we all know what spatial files look like. We've just worked with one. And the connectors are always very boring to demo because if they work, they work. You've connected to your data. The analysis is always where people sort of get excited. I've obviously shown you the spatial support in Tableau Prep here already, so that's really good. The offline map for Tableau Server. This is a quirky one. This one is essentially when, let's say you work in a bank, and some banks have this really sort of strict requirement where their Tableau server is completely air-gapped from the world. What that means is their Tableau server can't communicate with the internet. It can communicate in their private network, so it can communicate within the bank, it can communicate with other servers in maybe other locations, but it can't communicate with the internet. And the issue there is that the Tableau mapping assets, the tiles that load up when you load a map, they actually need to load from the Tableau server. So what they've actually enabled is the ability to create offline map support. But the key thing here is it's actually available in web edit. So it's not that it wasn't available before, it's always been available, but it's actually now available in web edit, which is a slightly nuanced sort of feature. To me, I don't even think this is a feature. This is a quality of life improvement. This is an enhancement or a fix, really, because it should have always been there, if that makes sense. Okay. The next thing is a resource monitoring tool for Tableau Server on Linux. The Tableau resource monitoring tool has existed for Windows, but I think 2 to 3 years ago, Tableau they enabled the ability to install Tableau Server on Linux. Now, I'll let you into a secret. Whenever I've installed Tableau Server on Linux machines, they just run so much smoother. There's none of this sort of faff you have with Windows servers where there's this plugin or this driver here or there's this service here hogging this resource. The Tableau servers that run on Linux just tend to run faster, and I'm pretty certain Tableau Online itself is probably run on a cluster which is based on Linux, not Windows. So if you're still on the Windows train because your organization's on that, it's something to be aware of. But this was actually a really important functionality that server admins really like to use to make sure things are working okay. And having it on Linux now means that there's parity between the two, and admins have an easy place to go see things. Now, it's not to say that you can't collect this information yourself. There are tools that can collect this for you and present it in a slightly different way. Tableau is just offering you the ability to look at this more easily. It's part of the server management add-on. So you can see here that, as with most things recently, there's an add-on for everything. So there's part of the server management add-on. So there's Tableau Server, then there's the server management add-on. If I go back to my pricing page, you'll see that that's $3 per person on your entire sort of licensing setup. So you've got to be aware of that. But otherwise, it's pretty much exactly the same as what we're used to on Windows. If you haven't checked out sort of Tableau server features, that's also fine. It's actually a very easy thing to get into. There's some really great documentation. Tableau have some of the best guides on their website to help you to do that. Now, the next thing is web authoring enhancements. Now, this is a weird one to cover because there's actually quite a few things in here. So I'm going to try and work through this very I'm going to say quickly, but I don't want to sort of skip over everything because nothing here is new. It's just that it's available in web edit. Okay. And so if I just very quickly go back to my map, which I was building before, I'm just going to create a new sheet and I'm just going to do a very, very basic chart. I'm going to do a chart that I know I might need later. So let me just change this to a continuous month. And let's change this to sales. So we have a nice little time chart. Okay, so if I go back to this, let me actually put it in a new window so that I don't keep swapping the screen and frustrating everyone flashing between tabs. The first thing is highlight actions. Okay, so highlight actions weren't available through web edit. So the way to do this, this is obviously the worst type of chart to show that actually. So I'll keep that open and I'll just bring in, let's bring in the subcategory onto color. And let's just bring profit onto rows, and let's bring what should we bring across the top? Segment, I think. Segment makes sense. Yeah, cool. So we've just broken down some segments and we're looking at profit. It's not exactly a beautiful chart, but what I want to do is show you the ability that you can use here, which is over here on the right hand side. To enable a highlight action, you just need to right click on the actual pill. You show the highlighter and it appears at the very bottom. You can't move these around, unfortunately. You can on a dashboard, but you can't in the browser. So they appear where they appear, if that makes sense. If you don't want the label, you can't unhide the label. You can in desktop, but you can't here. So the thing here with the highlight action is you just choose the thing that you want, and it's obviously highlighting the chart on the left-hand side. That's all it really does. When you select what you want, it keeps it highlighted and your mouse can sort of move around and free. That's now available in web authoring. The next thing is mark labels. You can quickly make adjustments to this. This is actually a quirky one. If I just create a tree map, let's just put sales on size, and I will put the detail to be, let's say category. Where's cat? Yeah, let's put category on detail. So that should give us a tree map. Great. And let's put color. Label, show mark labels. Essentially, you have this capability here to basically sort of control them a little bit better. It's a lot easier to control them, and they work a little bit smoother as well. I think there's been some notes that actually across desktop and web authoring, tooltips and interactions are a little bit crispier as well. So that's something to be aware of. You can create extracts. So this is a quirky one to show you. I'm going to go ahead and connect to a new data source. I'm going to hit the plus icon. And obviously here you see our published data sources. If I go to files, I can upload a file. And just for people's reference, you can actually connect to quite a large range of data sources. I don't think a lot of people are aware of this. A lot of people think Tableau Online is purely, just for connecting to data sources that have already been published. That's absolutely not the case. You can connect directly to databases. It's not as big as desktop, but of course the feature is there, and obviously these are going to continue growing over time. Let me go ahead and upload a file. Let's go to desktop. Let's go to my live stream folder. I'm going to choose the same Superstore sales files that I was using before. And as we upload this, let's just wait for that to be done. As we upload this, we get here, okay? And you're probably wondering, well, how does this work? So let's bring orders onto. I pulled into the wrong place. I think I thought I was in prep. Let's pull this onto this canvas, and I'm just going to click update so we can see the table that we're used to seeing here below. And of course, you can see this option here on the right hand side that says extract. Now, if I click on the extract, you'll see that extract will include all data. Extract will be created automatically when you switch to a different data source or when you switch tabs. Okay, so the key thing here is that the extract doesn't get created straight away like on desktop, where you hit extract, you choose some filters, boom, and you're done. Okay. Everything actually needs a little bit of time to process because you're on server, you're online. So if I go to a new tab here, what will actually happen is it will actually start creating the extract. And in this particular case, you can ask it to notify you when it's complete. Okay, and when you do that, it's going to ask you where to save it. So let's say extract demo into default, set save location. You can now close the editor. And when the extract finishes, the workbook extract demo will be saved to the default folder. Okay, so that really breaks my flow, because what it then does is it chucks you out of the experience. That this is consistent. This is not like a bug. This is not something that I made a mistake. This is what it does each time. So it's a little bit frustrating, because I was actually in a workbook. I was in the flow of doing something. So always recommend you do that, like once you've actually finished building what you need to build, and you can sort of more easily work with it. So let's go back into it. I'm actually going to go back into sheet 1. I think this is the one I created. I hope this is in a previous demo. Yeah, this is the one I created earlier on. Let's go hit edit. The extract is being created in the background. If I go back to sheet 6, you'll see here that the extract has finished. Okay, so it's over here on the left hand side, and essentially it was running in the background, and it's in that same place I showed you earlier for Tableau prep. So if you're just joining the stream now, earlier on I showed you that you could go to the jobs list and essentially check all the queued jobs that are available on Tableau server. You can go back to the beginning of the stream to sort of see that, but here the extract is finished, and now we're pretty much good to go. So extracts on the browser, they're a little bit clunky. They don't quite work like you're used to, but they work. Everything gets added to the queue, and once that's done, you can obviously come back into your workbook and start finishing. You can be notified by email when it's complete as well, which is a nice quality of life improvement as well. Apply filters to worksheets. This is an interesting one. So if I was to, let's say, build a dashboard, this is the worst dashboard I've ever built, honestly. No one please take a screenshot of this and use this as an example. Colleagues, if you're listening, this is not an example of my work that I deliver for clients, but we're going to go with it because I'm running out of time actually. I haven't got enough time, so I need to speed up if I'm going to cover everything. The key thing here is obviously if I go back to this sheet and let's say I add a filter here. I don't have anything in the filters pane, so let's say, what shall I filter with? I don't want to do category. Let's choose country region. That's a pretty good filter, yeah. So let's just add this here. I'm going to put in the filters pane. I'm not going to bring it into the view just yet. Of course, there's only one country. I actually meant city. Let's click all. Click OK. Then I'll go back to my dashboard. So you'll see here that this dashboard, if I go down to this drop-down list and go to list of filters, I can bring in the different filters. And if I bring in city, you'll see that I get the long list of items. Now, the thing they've added in 2020.4 is this full filters list. This wasn't actually available before. You had a limited set of capabilities. You could edit the filter. You couldn't really do much else, to be honest. But now what they've done is they've actually updated this. So now you can even choose whether to apply this to all items in the worksheets, just stuff on the dashboard, selected worksheets. If you do that, you get this full interface that you're used to seeing before in desktop. So now this actually makes it a viable option to go into Tableau Server or Tableau Online and fix things very quickly, because you're now able to do that very easily if it's a filter that's sort of causing you heartache, if that makes sense. Okay, the last thing to do is create fixed sets. So what I could do here is, let me just set this to take up the full screen. It states in entire view, and what I want to do is I'm just going to select this item here, and I'm going to hold command and select the nulls are behind my head. Thank you, Lorna. Lorna, I can't because I'm on a lag, things are sort of working at a slightly different pace. So I think I'm seeing your messages, but I'm seeing them late, if anything. So at some point, I'm going to look back on this live stream and play back Lorna's comments, and I'm going to be stuffed. It's going to highlight everything I got wrong. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and create a set. This is something now you can do here on the browser. So here, click create a set. Now, when I create that set, because I've done it here in sheet 6, if I go into a new view and actually go back in here, you can look for something called set. Now, let me just actually call, let's see if I can find it here. So you go, category set. So it takes the name of the field and uses that to basically create the set, if that makes sense. And if I right click on that, there's no ability to edit things, so you can't add items to the set from here. In order to do that, what you actually have to do is right click an item. So if I click on this item and go back down to this option, I can add to the existing set again, or I can remove this item from the set if it was part of it. So unlike on desktop where you can control the sets in a separate interface over on the left hand side in the data pane, here you can't do that. You have to do it basically through the data source. I keep saying right click, but what I actually mean is normal click, and then you get this option here to add or remove items to a set. Okay, so if I just bring back the features just to summarize them very, very quickly. Highlight actions, mark labels, create extracts, apply filters to worksheets, and create fixed sets. That's everything. Thing. Lorna's saying that comment was from a long time ago with the maps. I did figure there were nulls missing somewhere, but I decided to ignore them. I'm sorry. Now the next set of features, actually two features I can demo very quickly, and actually we're actually okay in terms of time, so we're doing pretty well here. We've got another half an hour or so to go. So let's look at predictive modeling. Now I'm not a stats boffin, so I'm sort of fully putting my hands up here and saying anything I say in the next 10 to 15 minutes while I talk about this and data access extensions should not be used against me in the future, for the record. So Tableau have been slowly adding predictive modeling functions inside of Tableau. In the previous release, they actually added some capability to essentially use predictive modeling functions to create essentially, how do I explain this? They added functions, but the functions themselves allow you to create sort of new contexts in visualizations. By new context, I don't mean that it's trying to run a machine learning algorithm to predict X, Y, and Z. They allow you to add context like trend lines that are maybe following a certain predictive model based on some sort of type of predictive analysis like linear regression or something like that. And so it's actually been really nice to see them slowly add to this, because it's actually started to become quite a sort of well thought through set of features that doesn't take predictive modeling into that sort of really vague area where you don't really know what's going on, but it keeps it simple and applicable to analytics and charts, which is what I'm going to show you. The other thing is, whenever you're doing predictive modeling into the future, as it were, and you need to see a month or two in the future, you always had this problem in Tableau where the date axis was limited. You couldn't actually go forward in time and let the model sort of run through in time. So what we have now is this new feature as well in 2020.4, which allows you to add a date axis extension. So I'm going to show you both of these features in the same demo. I'm going to go back to the browser and we're going to have a go at that. So I'm going to actually close this and just start from a new data set. I don't think I want to stay in the same workbook because it is super messy. So let's just go back, and it goes back to the view, of course. I'll go to the default folder, and we'll let's use our 2020.4 demo output from the first moment, and let's hit workbook open. Okay, so here we are. We're in a plain vanilla workbook. Let me go ahead and add order date to columns. And I will go down here and make this a continuous day. Actually, I need a continuous month. It doesn't make sense to be doing predictive models on a day-to-day basis. Months tend to be more sensible periods of time. And then I'll put sales onto the view here. Now, the thing to notice here is that when I go down and click on this, they call it the caret, this little down arrow, it's called the caret sometimes by Tableau professionals. You'll see this option here to extend the date range, okay, and I can choose how many weeks, months or years to extend this by. Now I can extend it by 6 months, and you'll see that actually nothing happens. That's because there's nothing actually really requiring this to sort of go forward, because that only really works. The data access extension and the predictive model really start to kick in when you're using table calculations, okay? Because this sum of sales is not a table calculation, it's not going to do anything. So a quick way to change this into a table calculation to show you what I mean is to do a moving average. So I think I set this to, let's just see how long I set this to. I need to remember, so 6 months it's looking at. If I change this to a moving average, you'll see that my dates go out to March 2021. Now, it's a very subtle change. Let me do that again and go back. If I go back, my data set ends on December 2020. If I go forward, my moving average stops in February 2021, but my date axis goes all the way to, I think it does actually go a little bit further to March, okay? And the way to sort of check this, if I go to edit table calculations, you can see that it actually looks at the previous two values. And so the reason this stops in February is because it's only looking at the previous two values. I ran out of values in 2 months. So if I was actually able to set this up to 6, what it would do is it would extend the date range up to the 6th month, if that makes sense. If I change this to 7, okay, it does keep going, okay, but what starts to happen is I start to lose context out of my data set, if that makes sense, okay? So it doesn't really make sense to sort of misalign those two values. If you're looking forward, if you're doing a moving average of roughly 6-month moving average, you need to make sure that your date axis range looks forward long enough for that to not look crazy, but also show you enough context for the future if that's the way you want to run this, okay? So that's the date axis extension. It's very simple. It only works on table calculations. Actually, let me rephrase it. It only works on certain types of calculations. If I actually go back to the where is my what's new in 2020.4 page? So date extension works with predictive modeling functions, table calculations like running average, and external services like R and Python. R and Python makes sense because, of course, you could be doing predictive modeling in R and Python. And so like Tableau's own predictive models, it makes sense. So table calculations, predictive models, R and Python are the sort of two instances where they work. So I've shown you the date axis extension. Let me show you predictive model and let me show you how those two work in synergy. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to clear this table calculation. I'm going to remove this, and I'm also just going to remove this date axis extension so that I've got a nice reset point and you can see me do everything from scratch. I'm going to add the cells in here. We're just going to keep this very simple. I'll go down here and I'll create a calculated field, okay? And what I want to do is actually bring in some of the predictive modeling functions. Now, I'm a real hack here. I don't remember functions at all. I've become 100% reliant on the fact that this little sidebar is always there. If that surprised you, if you've never seen this, I keep meeting people who've never seen this little arrow here on the right-hand side or thought to press it and found that everything is actually really well described here on the right-hand side. So let's just type in model, and you'll see that there's actually two functions, one called model percentile and model quantile. Now this is where my predictive and statistics knowledge is going to really sort of put me in a corner, because I don't really know how to explain these well, but I always give it a go. So model quantile. The best way to think of model quantile is if I take something like the median value is actually part of a quantile, so it's the middle value. 0.25 is the lower quartile, 0.75 is the upper quartile. So quartiles are like ranges. They essentially represent roughly where your data might be in a specific range. So if I take the median value, that means I'm tracking essentially the middle of my data set, okay? So it's working within a certain range. The percentile is slightly different because what it does is it gives you the probability of a certain percentage of data being above or below the line, okay? So those two, they are different functions, but they have slightly different purposes in terms of how they work inside of Tableau. So that's the simplest way I can come up with describing it so far. I'm still trying to improve on it. So if you've got a better description, you know where the comments are, let me know. But today I'm going to use a model quantile. And I'm just going to actually double click this so that it adds it nicely for me so I don't have to type it. Now, when I click inside of the function, let's see if I can just expand this. I think it's going to expand everything. Yeah, I'll expand everything. Actually, it's fine to be one size bigger. If I type this in, you'll see that it gives you an example of how the function should be written. Okay. And if I just sort of look at this for 1 second, you'll see that I have two options, okay? I have this one here, which is model quantile, target expression, predictor sessions, or there's a little tiny or here that you can't really see. It says I can either describe it like this, where I tell what the model is, the quantile target, and the expression, predictor expression, okay? That's because there's two ways of writing the predictive models. The first way is to just assume you're using the default predictive model, which is the linear regression. And that just means you don't need to specify the model that's being used whatsoever. Then I use the target expression and the predictor expression. So let's go ahead and write that first. I'm going to find the median of my data set. So I'm just going to type in 0.5 here. So I'm just going to type 0.5. I'm looking at the reference to see if that needs to be in speech marks. I don't think it does. I think I get away with it. The predictor expression is essentially what I'm trying to predict. So in this case, it's the sum of sales. So let's just type sum. Let's hit enter of sales. Let autocomplete do its work. And then the last thing I need is sorry, I think I said predictor expression previously. What I meant is target expression. So the thing I'm trying to predict. And then the predictor expression is basically this here at the top, the date, because that's actually what's going to control how the model works, if that makes sense. So if I just type, I could type it, but there's going to be a problem. So if I just type in order date, there's a real big problem with this, which is that the order date is at a day level, okay? And secondly, I also have this issue where if I just click on this error here, I can't mix aggregate and non-aggregate arguments with this function, okay? So I've got two problems to solve here. I'm going to solve them in a very cheeky way. I'm actually going to delete order date there, and I'm going to hold command and drag month order date here, because in my calculation window, what I actually have is not order date. What I actually have, I'm trying to expand this, but I can't. What I actually have is month of order date. So I need actually a date truncation function to get this to work at the same level of detail as my view. And then to get rid of this error here with aggregate and non-aggregate functions, I'm just going to make this into an attribute. So attr, go over to the end and just get this going and hit apply. And now that works. You can see that it's appeared here on the left-hand side as calculation 1. I'm going to call this median predictive model. That's not what it is. I should call it quantile. Let's just stick strictly to the terms that I know. Hit apply and then hit OK. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag this out, and I'm not going to drop it here. What I could do is put it here, and then what you see is that it creates this line, and they have, you know, generally the same axis. What I'm actually going to do, I'll show you a little trick here. It's a nice quick way of getting things into the view if you want them to sort of be superimposed on each other. Of course, it's not going to work for me because I'm trying to do a demo. It probably doesn't work in WebEdit. That's where I went wrong here. So you can see I'm trying to drag this here into the axis. It's not letting me. For some reason. You can let me drag it into the view, but it's not letting me drag it here. So I will have to put it next to sales and do a dual axis. And what I'll then do is synchronize these so you can actually see the extent. I keep right clicking and oh no, I think I have to synchronize it up here. There we go. Dual axis. No, okay, the synchronization option is not here. Why is that missing? Why can I not synchronize this? What am I missing? No. Let's just check this again. Am I being blind? No, I don't think I am. Dual axis. I should have a synchronization option here, but I don't seem to have one. I can't explain that. I could swear that existed before. What I will, of course, do is open up 2020.4 desktop and basically rebuild the same thing. While that's opening, let me edit this and grab the calculation. That is probably another WebEdit limitation, Steph, if I'm honest. But I swear I've gotten past that before. I don't know what's going on. I think it's just demo bugs, as it were. So let's go ahead and connect to Superstore US. I'm going to go ahead and create a very quick calculation here. Just the calculation window came off screen. This is the exact same calculation I created before. So call this model quantile. And now I'm here. I could have done my little trick anyway. Oh god, demos. If I do a 1.5 hour demo reel, something is bound to go wrong, isn't it? So I guess I was asking for it. So let's go ahead here and choose month. And let's get sales back in here because this is what we were looking at before. And what I can do, you can see here that I can actually drop it here onto the axis, whereas before it wasn't letting me do that. So what I did before is I did this, and then I dual axis those two. And what I'm looking for is this option to synchronize the axis, which wasn't showing up on. I swear that's been there before. Maybe I'm imagining things. Sometimes that happens. So what I was looking to do is synchronize the axis like this so that you could see that this line was tracking the median fairly accurately. Let's remove this model quantile. I'm going to drag it on again, this time doing what I was planning to do before, which is to drag it onto the axis. And when I do that, you see it does something slightly different. it does multiple measures in the same, I never know how to describe this. Multiple measures, I'm just going to call it multiple measures in the same measure values pill. Okay, so it achieves the same effect, but it's much faster because it's just one drag and don't have to mess around with dual axis, seeing as the axes are showing the same thing. That's the caveat. You can't really do this when things are showing different things at different scales. It has to be really literally the same thing on the axis for both of them for this to work really well. So there you go, you can see this very nicely. Now what I'm going to do very quickly, I'm going to do a little hack here. I'm just going to very quickly edit these other ones to show the 25 because before I show you the predictive modeling capabilities, which is where I'm sort of heading to, I need to create the lower quartile, and if I edit this one, I need to create 75. Let's create this, let's call this upper quartile. Click apply, and quantile, let's actually call this what it is, median. Okay, and what I can now very easily do is I can drag the model lower and upper and drag them in here, and you'll get a line either side. Okay, so now you can see the predictive modeling functions working, but they're not doing much predicting because I've not extended the date axis range. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead to date, and you can see here I've got the option to extend the date axis range, and if I extend it by 6 months, you'll see that it basically carries on. It just extends the line. Now this model I've got isn't very good, because if I extend this to a year, it just takes the trajectory that I had over here and just literally sends it off. But notice as the time period gets bigger, the gap between the upper and the middle quartiles change, and that's because the predictive model is trying to predict what might happen in the future based on sort of what happened here, and it's essentially saying that the further out you go in time, the less accurate that's going to be. So my data is going to fall inside of a bigger and bigger range, if that makes sense. The other way to show you this is if I set this to some crazy value, let's say set this to 2 years, right? Just to really exaggerate this. So I've got this option here where you can custom choose a unit of time and a period of time. So I'll just set this to, let's set it to 2 years. Okay. And what I will do is I will add a month to filters pane. Okay. And I'll do range of dates because that's what I actually need. I always forget the trick of right clicking the date and just showing the filter to make it work faster, essentially. And watch what happens as I sort of reduce this filter, right? So if I reduce this filter, notice it's still extending the range, okay, by a certain amount of time. But as I do this, the prediction goes wilder and wilder. So basically, when I have such a small extent of data, the orange line is my actual data. These lines get wider and wider and wider to the point where, you know, it's just the range is so wide. This is garbage. This is not something you can use in any sort of visualization. But I think if you're actually smart with two things, if you're smart with the date extension, so if I just say 3 months, I think that's actually quite reasonable. If I've got this sort of long history of data and some seasonality to it, and I extend it by 3 months, that makes sense. That's the first thing I can do, choose a reasonable date axis range. The next thing I can do is choose a better model, and that's where we come to a new feature in 2020.4. Yes, I'm still on predictive models. We've actually got some new predictive modeling functions. Okay, so previously we only had linear regressions, but we now also have the ability to add and I can never say this, linearized regression. No, that's just so wrong. Let's try that again. Let's go to let's just Tableau predictive models. I swear I can never say this properly. It's an absolute tongue twister. So let's see, choosing a predictive model. So you've got the linear regression, which is what I said before. It's regularized linear regression. That's a real tongue twister. I can't believe I even got it right first time there. But notice that the examples they give you here are actually writing in a slightly different way. This was actually the second way I highlighted earlier on. So this model linear, model RL, which is regularized, I can't say it now, regularized linear regression. I read that as regression for a second. I think I'm getting aggravated now. And then you've got this last one, which is the Gaussian process regression, which is the GP one. I'm actually going to choose this one. I'm going to copy this terminology. I'm going to add it to the front of my calculation to change these models, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pause the view just so that you can see the effect a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is you essentially just need to add a string to the front of this like that. So that says model GP, hit apply. The chart will go gray because I'm changing the calculation and I've paused the view. So if I hit paste on that one, hit apply, hit OK, and the last one, do the same thing, paste that in, hit apply, hit OK, and then hit play. You'll notice that this model does a lot better job at noticing seasonality, okay? And it is still sort of extrapolating into the future, but you notice that it's doing a much better job of it than the previous one, because it's able to sort of notice a level of seasonality. Remember, the upper quartile is this top one here, and the lower quartile is this red one, and the blue one is the median sort of predictive value. So this actually starts to work a lot better, because if I just get rid of the upper and lower, okay, and I show you what a trend line does, you'll notice that this okay, I can't add a trend line here. I can not from the axis, but I can do it here. See, a trend line just generally draws a line in the general direction of the data set, okay? And I do have some control on the trend line, but these predictive models, I think, do a better job of tracking where the data is likely to go. So obviously, it's noticing there's some seasonality around winter and the back end of summer here, and it's sort of pushing that through into our data set. So it's obviously looking into, even though my value here in June is really low, it is looking into the past and suggesting you're likely to perform better. So this model, I think, is actually starting to show something a little bit more realistic, and I've not gone too wild with the data extension. So it is starting to give us a little bit of context of where the data might go, so people are familiar with what's going on. What I'd like to be able to do is just to change the color on everything that is part of the predictive model on this line. It's a little bit quirky. I don't know how to figure out how to do that. I think what I'd have to do is somehow figure out a calculation that knows what the maximum extent of the data is, then changes the color of the line manually. But what I'd like to do is have an option so that I could either make this line dotted or just change the color to let people know that this isn't real data, this is extrapolated data based on what we know. So if you were going to use this as some sort of guide, the last thing you do is maybe change the color so it's more muted, hit apply, and there you have your context. You have your predictive model working inside of a Tableau view. And I think this is a very light and appropriate uses of predictive model in terms of analytics as well. So that was a really long demo. Gosh, that took 15 minutes to show you those two features. But they need a lot of detail. I appreciate predictive models in Tableau aren't something that everyone's covered. So I really appreciate that. I haven't looked at my comments in a long time. Omar, yes, it does work in desktop. I think there's a bugged browser, to be honest. That's another advert for how much work Tableau need to do to bring that up to feature parity. It seems like the forecast option gives you more capabilities with seasonality. Yes, the forecast option does, but the forecast option uses the standard forecasting model that's used in R, I think, and that's actually quite a limited model. So the predictive models give you an alternative because number one, you have a choice of predictive models. Number two, it seems like they're going to use this architecture to bring more types of predictive models to those functions. They've basically built the piping, and they're now going to add flesh to these features over time. The data access extension was an important part of that. But I can't speculate. That's sort of just what I'm thinking based on Tableau's history of releasing features and how they typically work. Okay. So let's go back to my browser. I've honestly forgotten what else we have to cover here. So we have, that was the Tableau pricing. Where is my Tableau new features? Here we go. So we've covered predictive modeling and data access function. Custom views tab. Okay, this is a nice easy one to show you. This is a nice change of tone after covering predictive models. Wow. If I go back in here to the home view, and I just go to Superstore workbook, there's got to be a workbook in here that I can look at. I'll look at web authoring improvements, and what I'll do is let's look at this as a grid view over on the right hand side, and I will go to dashboard 1, which is another ugly dashboard that I built a long time ago to demo a feature. This looks more coherent than my previous one though. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this filter here to just consumer, and it's going to change the charts a little bit. And what you'll see is that at the top we have this toolbar, and this toolbar is essentially where you have certain functions that relate to the visualization. If I go to view, you'll see that I get this custom views tab, okay? And I can go ahead and create a new one. So I'm going to call this consumer view. And what this does is actually remembers this setting for me. If I choose this as make it my default, and make it visible to others means others can see that I've created this consumer view and they can use it too. So when I hit save, notice two things. The view will refresh, number one. Number two, the default view that I'm looking at now is view consumer. So if I was to go back to default and then go back into web authoring improvements and go to this dashboard, what it will take me to is my consumer view by default because I selected that option before. Okay. Now the thing is, users create this all the time, but admins want to know what people are creating so they can see if there's any insights or views that people might like to see more often. So there's a new custom views tab where I can actually see all of this in one place. That's pretty much the feature in a nutshell. You can see I created this 30 seconds ago and it's now available. And obviously if I hit the consumer view, it just takes me right to it. Now, the nice thing here is this is obviously not a great example because it's just me on this demo instance. I'm the only user. But if you had lots of people creating custom views, they'd come up as a list. Okay, so you'd start to get some insight into how the custom views are being used, what's in them, but also how many times they're being viewed. So if someone's custom view is maybe sort of rip-roaring away in terms of popularity, maybe it's worth building a custom workbook just for that particular section to add more context and richness to that particular analysis, seeing as that particular part of the business is more actively using the analytics tool that you've offered them. So that's pretty much the feature in a nutshell. It's not really that complex. Just looking at the comments, the mean squared forecast. I'm not entirely sure. That's a bit above my understanding. I think I need to go on Wikipedia that to check that. They could have just queried the read-only Postgres repo before. Yes, they could have done. But as you might not know, with Tableau Online specifically, you don't actually have full access to the Postgres repo. Okay, with Tableau Online, you only get 2 views in the custom admin view. In fact, I can potentially show you that. This is a slight tangent. If I go to the Information Lab demo, I think I can actually show you the admin insights view. If I just go to explore admin insights. So this is the view that you get, and you get these 2 data sources, TS events and TS users. These are the only 2 views you get, so you don't get the full access to the Postgres view. So custom views don't feature heavily in these sets, but in Tableau Server, absolutely you can do that. But for Tableau Online, you can't. So I think that's why they're really creating this, because on Tableau Online, where people are mostly living in this interface, you don't have that option. So that's it's a little bit more of a trickier example. Great. So if I go back to this list, block comments, how have I not shown this feature already? Man, I've had so many great opportunities to show you this and I haven't. This is available on both desktop and web edit, so I'm not going to labor the point here. I'm just going to create a calculated field and I'm going to make this larger so you can see. So previously, if you wanted to create a calculation, you just do something like this. So you just say sum of cells. And that hasn't changed. Obviously I can't type, so that doesn't help me. But if I can type properly, I can just write a simple function. Then I might want to comment it, and I'd do a double / and I'd add my comment here. Now the problem is that if I went to a new line, I'd have to keep doing that. I'd have to keep creating this. Okay, not ideal. In 2020.4, you can just do /*, say what you want. Carry on a new line and then end it here like that, and that's it. You can do multi-line comments. So what this enables is the ability to go ham on ASCII art if you really want to do that. You can oh god, that's really buggy, let's not do that. Let's just paste this like this. Let's paste this like this. I can give it a nice header Yeah, you can get these back when I was, gosh, when I think I was 15 or 16, I used to go onto game forums, and game forums used to write their walkthrough guides in text, and this is exactly how they looked. So they have like level one, do this, do that. You could get that into your calculation window now if you're really fond of that. Okay, so that's pretty much the feature in a nutshell. It's block comments. It's really nice quality of life improvement. For those people who are more verbose in terms of their comments, they now have a better way of doing that. It's also a nice way of commenting large sections or large calculations that you thought worked and didn't work. That's actually probably what I'd use it for, because I can just comment out a section of my calculation very quickly and then carry on with the rest of it. And then if I need it, I can comment it back in. So that's actually the really useful thing there, being able to comment a section of your calculation in a nutshell. Okay. So that's that. Let's go back to my list of features. So block comments, we've done. Okay, so we have a few data connectors. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch to data connectors. We've got another maybe 10, 15 minutes before we're done. I appreciate I'm running over, but I also like to cover things properly. So let's just touch on some of these. So the Salesforce connector API got an update. Okay, so essentially what this means is that more Salesforce objects are now visible when you connect to them in Tableau. If you ever use Tableau with Salesforce, you'll notice that certain types of fields don't come through from Salesforce because they're maybe bespoke fields in Salesforce and therefore they don't show up in Tableau. But now what they're doing, obviously because Salesforce acquired Tableau, you're now starting to see better integration between Tableau and Salesforce. And every single release, they've actually improved the quality of the connector and the way things work. Okay, so this is something just to be aware of. If you're using Salesforce, this is something to worth, keeping a pulse on, because you might have tried something literally last month and now this month it's possible. Okay. The next thing is the Datorama connector. Now, this Datorama connector actually touches on two things, okay? The Datorama connector is actually now available as part of the, let's see if I can find it here. It's not actually listed here. It's something called partner extensions. Partner extensions are essentially ways where partners of Tableau can write their own data connections. Okay, if I click on this link to the Tableau extensions gallery and we just go there, you'll notice that I actually arrive at this page which is slightly different to what I've been used to, and I'm actually able to download a connector here for Salesforce Datorama. So if I go back to the extension gallery, you'll notice that the new thing they've done in 2020.4 is they've actually split out the connectors gallery into its own space, whereas before dashboard extensions had a dedicated place here, they now have an extension gallery for connectors. And so what people are doing is these partners are writing their own connectors for Tableau with their own systems, and Datorama and Salesforce are one of those people. Elastic are also another well-used connector that people really want, because quite a few companies do actually use Elastic, especially startups. They use that to do things that are slightly sort of more new age in terms of innovation and analytics. So all of these are now available. Now, the key thing to bear in mind is that the partner has to build and maintain these, and they don't have the traditional installation path as you used to. You see here, I have to download a file, then I have to put it in a specific place on my computer, close Tableau, open Tableau, then you're able to see it. But it's a fairly straightforward process on a Mac, which is not really going to be that useful for many people. I'm just looking at, I do have a screen this far to my left. I'm not trying to break my neck here. If I go to my documents in my Tableau repository and I open up my data sources, you will see, actually, no, not my data sources. It's actually connectors. You'll see there's a connectors folder in here. And what you need to do is actually download the file into this location. Okay, I recently wiped my laptop, so I actually cleared the connector that I previously had, but you see here that you need to put it inside of your Tableau repository. Then once you've done that, you need to install any driver that tool might need in terms of things like a JDBC connector if necessary, or any other drivers in the back end. And once you've done that, you activate the connector and everything's pretty much good to go. It's installed and ready to work. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. If you're looking for a connector, you can now lobby your technology partner to build their own connector for Tableau, rather than waiting for Tableau to incorporate a slightly weird or quirky database they might never come to use. So if I go back, I need to go back quite a few steps, don't I? I go back to 2020.4 new features. Hopefully it takes me back to where I was on the page. No, it won't. So let's go back down. We were quite far down. I talked about Salesforce API and Datorama connector. Ask Data I'll come back to in a second. Dynamic parameter improvements. This is a small quality of life feature. If I just go back in here, I close this calculation, create a parameter, and let's make this a date, okay, and call this date parameter, and make it a range. It needs to be a range for this to work properly. Set values from order date, and it goes and gets them. But obviously here I have an option to choose what happens when the workbook opens, and here I can go select order date. Okay, so what now happens if I just go back to the setting is you can now set a parameter range to fields min and max value upon opening the workbook or when the fields data source is refreshed. The actual quality of life improvement here is just you've just got a few more options essentially. Okay, you can choose a few more things. It's really sort of a light touch fix here. It's not like a breakthrough feature. Actually, 2 versions back they added the ability for dynamic parameters, so you could essentially get 80% of the value. But what they've been doing is just improving the experience when you use it on web edit, but also here on Tableau desktop. Okay, if I go back, Snowflake OAuth improvements, that's quite a specific feature. I don't use Snowflake, so I can't really talk much to this feature to talk about how much better the OAuth is. Analytics extensions for Tableau Online. So what you can now do is you can now enable R and Python on your Tableau Online instance. Okay, this requires you to do a couple of things in the back end and set things up. But once you've done that, your R or Python server obviously needs to be public to Tableau Online for it to work, which can be slightly sort of difficult because in some companies you don't have your Tableau, you don't have your R or Python server in a public place. You have it somewhere internal. So that can be a little bit of a cumbersome thing to set up just to make sure everything's working right. We touched on Tableau server management improvement features. Backups are faster, essentially. There's now an improved way of creating backups, which is easier and gives better visibility of sort of what's going on. And if something fails, you can retry from the last checkpoints. You don't have to start from scratch as well, which is a really nice sort of quality of life improvement. A couple of last few things. So we've got Ask Data to look back at. Data quality warning on metrics. This is useful. Data quality warnings are essentially on Tableau Online. When you create one of those metrics, what you didn't have, a bit like in Tableau Prep earlier on, where we saw we didn't see the data quality warnings, you didn't see those in metrics either. So now those are available. Merging duplicate external assets and Tableau catalog metrics and integration. Now these two things are related to the data management add-on. And specifically inside of the data management add-on is something called Tableau Catalog. And with those two things, you get these two features. Okay. So again, what they keep doing over the last, I'd say 6 releases is keep on improving this lineage feature, because essentially what they're trying to do is make this a one-stop shop for handling and managing metadata, especially when you've got things like duplicate data connections. You've got 2 people connecting to the same thing, being able to merge them where it makes sense. They might be authenticating individually, and so maybe you don't want to do that, but where it makes sense, you might actually want to merge these assets together so that Tableau talks to one thing and logs in once rather than logging in 100 times because 100 different people have created the same asset. Okay, and then again with Azure, I'm not exactly an Azure expert, but long story short, what you can now do is you can now have an external repository in Azure rather than necessarily using the one that was sort of built into Tableau. So these two are sort of very unique features for Microsoft Azure customers essentially. And then the last thing is multiple key activation on Tableau servers. So you can enter a bunch of keys and activate them all at once rather than having to do one at a time, which was again, if you're doing a server upgrade or install and you've got several keys to activate, it can be a little bit of a painful process. Okay, so the last thing to do is just show you this Ask Data improvements option here. So let's go back to do I actually have my other browser open? I think I do. Here we go. And if I go back to Explore, go to Default, and let me look at this as a list again. And let's find my demo output. This is my data source that I created at the very beginning of this live stream. And the thing you can see here is that I'm loading straight into the Ask Data interface. Now, Ask Data, a lot of people don't like it. I'm actually starting to become quite fond of it because it's starting to work a lot more often. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask a very basic thing. Profit broken down by category by month. Okay. So I just typed that, sort of didn't really look at what I was typing. I've hit enter, nothing's happened. Let's try that again. I think I must have missed the key. And let's have a look. So yeah, it's showing me the profit by category, and it's broken it down across months. So it's built exactly what I wanted to see, which is great. The nice thing is that in this version, they've added a stacked bar chart, which is this. So you can see this in a slightly different way, which is quite nice. So you can actually type as a stacked bar chart if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that because I actually quite liked the line before. Now, what I can also do is I can also type in a date range. So I can say between March 2006 and Feb 2017. Okay, let's see if that works. I just hit enter, March 2006 and February 2017, and let's click on this to actually see what's going on. Okay, so March 2006, there wasn't any data. I think my data set actually starts in 2017. So let me try that again and be a little bit more brutal. Let's say between July 2017 and March 2019. Okay, so between March 2017 and July 2019. Just hit enter. And yeah, it's pretty much filtered that quite nicely. But the nice thing here is that obviously if you do a date range, it's actually giving you this nice interface as well. So you can play around with this. So the way you have to think about this is that essentially, if you think about, new users to Tableau, completely brand new, never used Tableau before. If the first thing they have to do is learn Tableau to get to it and start using it, that's actually not an ideal experience. So if they can come to something like this and just simply type a question, an answer, and get it back, that's really, really valuable, because now people are able to build something. And if they're learning, they can obviously open this up. They can save this, save it as a new asset. I'll just call this as a demo worksheet even. Hit save, and it opens it up, and they've got a chart straight away. What you then want is to give this sheet a home and finish it off. You can go in here and edit it, and you can start to play with it and understand how it worked. But you have a nice, really easy to use way of getting involved. Now, obviously this is not ideal. This is going to improve over time. The natural language understanding is going to improve. Admins have to do quite a bit of work adding things like synonyms in and data roles. We've talked about that earlier on. They have to be added in here. There's a whole sort of interface for letting you do that here, whether it's things like date, time, filters, whether it's in individual fields, you can go in, add synonyms. You can also control the data roles and then publish them, and then those data roles can be applied time and time again. So there's a lot of bit of handiwork that needs to be set up. And you've also got the complexity of language, because everyone has to speak English for this to work, and that doesn't always happen. So there's a little bit of overhead, but this feature is getting really, really good. A while back, I wasn't able to type and get a sort of a smooth answer like I just did. It's a lot smoother, and it's a lot faster to work with. Okay. So we're finally there. Gosh, that took a lot longer than I was hoping. I'm really sorry to keep anyone. If you've watched this entire stream, I'd love you to leave a comment. Omar, I know you've watched the entire stream. You've been very, very engaged throughout the session. Thank you for spending 2 hours, nearly 2 hours with us today on an evening. I don't know where in the world you are. Let me know where you are in the world. I'd love to sort of be able to know where everyone is joining in from. Just a few things before we finish off. What I said earlier on is I was going to show you a new feature that is currently in preview, and this is actually something called collections. Let me just show you this. So Tableau Collections. Okay, if I just search this, you actually find that this comes up here, okay, in the documentation, which it's actually live in 2020.4. And so they've got a really nice instruction guide here on how collections work. So this is something that anyone can go and look at straight away. It's public. And what I've actually been able to do is secure access to the preview, so we can actually see what that looks like. So earlier on, I talked about something unique. This is essentially that. So what I did earlier on, I'm not going to sort of break this down too much. I think it's unfair to critique a feature that's still in development and they're asking for feedback on. So if you'd like to give feedback, you can go to that page I showed you earlier on, apply to be into the in the preview, so you can try collections for yourself. I've created a collection here. I did this yesterday. It's really, really nice. And you can actually see here that I've actually put a bunch of things into this. And so the way collections work is essentially a way of creating your own little project folder, which can store pretty much any asset that you want, whether it's a flow, a data source, a metric, a workbook, or a worksheet. Everything can come into one place. Now, on conference, they actually demoed something more advanced than this, which let me create some sort of feature page, as it were, with metrics, a dashboard, and things I could actually interact with to analyze and filter data with in one place. So I'm hoping that comes in the near future. But as a starting point, I can actually see quite a few use cases for this, because each of these collections have a link. You can share them as you can do with most things in Tableau. They have a new sort of icon, which shows that they're here to stay. Tableau invest into some sort of new parts of their interface. They really do it properly. I can invite usernames and people to this. They're really easy to create. Essentially, you just need to go to any content. So if I go to this overview, for example, I just have this option to add to collection. When I go to that, it gives me the option to add it to my existing collection, or I can create a new one. So I'll call this new collection 2020.4 demo and create. Okay. An unexpected error happened. I think this is because I had a point in there. So let's try creating that. Yeah, computers tend to hate points. Okay, so it's interesting because it seems to have duplicated it. But again, I said this earlier on. This is still in preview, so it will be buggy. We shouldn't be judging this based on how it works. And you can see these are private. So the one that it created. Let me delete one of them. I hope this is the one with the thing I just saved. If not, I'll be a little bit stuck. Yeah, this is the one here on the left hand side. So you can see I added this item to this collection. I can obviously change the description, and I can also change the name. If I just go to these three dots and rename, I can call, yeah, I actually already named it something sensible. So if you rename it, you rename it. The other thing is you can change the privacy. So you can go to permissions here and you can make it public or private. But this is a very, very early stab at this. So Tableau really want feedback on this. I personally quite like it. Any capability where I can essentially customize the way I use Tableau is something very welcome, because Tableau server can be a very overwhelming place. So if you can create a bunch of assets that are important for someone and say, look, here's a collection for new joiners on Tableau server, right? It can walk them through the experience of using Tableau server, give them activities all in one place, and it's really nice and easy to work with. Then as they get more advanced, they can create their own collections. As you work as a team, you can create a collection of items with assets that you've pulled from different projects across Tableau server into one place. I obviously want more organization of that. So I'd like to be able to have a data section, a flow section, a metrics section. A little bit more context would be very, very useful. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Let me head over back now to the question. I'm going to actually drag this on screen so we can actually address this very easily. Right. So I see you entered a block comment in the comments. That's really good. Great session. Got to go. It's 9:30 over here. Oh, okay. Sorry, I lost you there. Thank you very much for nominating me. God, I'm a little bit, I never know what to say when people sort of speak positively of you, but I really appreciate it. I really appreciate when people take the time to watch the content, let alone, share some kind words. So how do you add them to online? Oh, okay. So, Omar, if you've gone, you're probably not seeing this, but essentially, if you go to the very top of this collection page, you can sign up for the preview here. Okay, so it's not something that comes on by default. When you simply put your name, email, and the URL for the Tableau Online site in here, it can't be a dev instance of Tableau Online. So it can't be one of the beta instances like I use for this demo. It has to be an actual functional Tableau Online instance, because it's being switched on in a slightly different way. So it can't be on a test instance. So that's one quirk to be aware of. Head over to this page and you basically end up getting into the preview, and it's nothing sort of hidden. It's very publicized here at the very top of the page, but you have to know about it to find out about it, if that makes sense. So that's how that works. And does adding them make them available for prep as well? So yeah, so the collections support everything. So you could have a collection which is just flows. You could have a collection which is flows and their data sets. It's something that cuts across the entire server. I think that's what you're asking. So collections work across the whole entire environment. And can you show the merge duplicate assets on catalog? I would want to show that, except for on this particular instance. Let me go to external assets. It's a little bit difficult because I need to find a good example. So what I'll probably do, I won't do it here on stream because we're running a little bit long, but what I will do is I'll create a separate video and I'll upload it to the channel probably later this week, if not early next week. So just if you're looking for that, check out this channel. I'll show you how to do that specifically as a follow-on from this live stream. And then I'll be able to create like an actual example where you can see that work properly, if that makes sense. Okay. So that's pretty much all the comments. Thank you everyone who's joined in. If I just close this chat tab now, I'd laugh right now if people hadn't been watching this whole time because something happened or something disconnected. But thankfully everything's still working. So thank you very much everyone who's joined. I really, really appreciate it. We spent 2 hours together. It's been amazing. I think maybe next time we should split these up. Maybe not. I actually quite liked doing it in one go. It gives it a nice holistic feel. Definitely be sure to check out our meetup page. And this is a great place to find out all the future events that we've going. Future live streams will also be here. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel. This is obviously where this live stream is going to go. You can see that it's live there already. And yeah, just really engage with us. We appreciate that it's a really tough time for a lot of people around the world, and so anything we can do, especially when it comes to Tableau and Alteryx, to help you with your experience of it, anything we can do to help, let us know in the comments, let us know through our events, be in touch with us on social media, and wherever you are in the world, I hope things are going well, and yeah, we'll catch you in the next live stream. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in.